Washington has found their starting left tackle.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's the site editor of Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, coming to you on this Tuesday morning. Lars, I picked a very interesting weekend to go out of town, didn't I? We're going to be recapping a whole lot of fun stuff from the rest of the weekend, where there was a whole lot of action in the transfer portal, and the most important place to start is along the offensive line, where we get, I want to say 95% of the questions over the course of the offseason from our awesome everydayers are all about the offensive line. And this is, Lars, we finally got some good news, and it appears Washington has found their starting left tackle. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. I mean, in the sense that that's what we both expect him to come in to do. That's what we both expect Maximus McCree to come in and do, to compete with Elijah Jacquet, Sione Solo. And there's a couple of players that might get
Justin
a shot.
Hilkema too.
Right, Justin Hilkema was a true freshman, but especially once you start to look. No, and this is no disrespect to big country Justin Hilkema, because that I normally you would think I'd give the freshman of the year in the weight room. His size does say I can play right away as a true freshman. But when you look at the projection of what Washington wants to do on offense, it would be better to have somebody with experience who's played the college game at the college level. And that's what McCree is going to do. He got 2 games of experience at Maryland in 2022. 2022.
Yep, that's correct.
After coming from the junior college ranks the year prior. Didn't see much time after that. Went back to Iowa Central last season, didn't play. To be clear, for the people that asked both Roman and I about that, he did not play as indicated on the participation sheet last season. Most likely just to whether there was a redshirt year or just eligibility concerns, whatever the reason, it's not a play. It wasn't because he couldn't play skill wise. And I think that's important to note.
Yeah, no, sorry. It's just to continue on that, because I had a lot of people ask me that as well, where I think if it's anything, it was probably the NCAA transfer rules. If anything else, where he did transfer up and then transferring back down, it was probable that he had to sit out that year for those reasons. But because all the film that he showed was all practice film, so he was eligible to practice. It wasn't like he was hurt. Didn't look like it was anything to do with, anything off the field. So it probably had something to do with the NCAA transfer rules. But he's a really exciting prospect. This is something that our good buddy Ben Glassmeyer wrote about over on Huskies Wire, where he's a really athletic guy where, there are certainly going to be, some concerns since he hasn't played in a game since 2022. But outside of that, he's got some Big Ten experience. He's got a year to practice just in that same sort of environment. And it's something where he's got the frame, he's got the athleticism, where if it all works out, just in Brendan Carroll's system, he seems like he could be a more than serviceable piece.
No doubt. And it's worth also mentioning, I know people are going to hear the junior college tank and think, oh, great, it's a JUCO, kind of a flyer, diamond in the rough. But he's a 2-time JUCO All-American. So he succeeded at the highest level that he could. For whatever reason, I actually, honestly, it's worth mentioning, I haven't seen a reason why he didn't get more playing time at Maryland, whether it was skiing fit. It didn't seem like
I think it was just bodies that I saw. Sorry, that was something I've talked about with some people off the air, and it looks like it was just the bodies who were ahead of him, where they did have a couple of established tackles, and it was just kind of it doesn't look like he's going to get any time in the foreseeable future, because those guys that were ahead of him established themselves and were there for a couple of years. So it was probably just in his best interest to end up looking elsewhere.
Exactly. But it's also, if Maryland, a Big Ten school, is going to identify that type of talent, clearly Washington identifies the same level of talent. And it just gets back to the word that we always talk about. How does he project? That's what we're projecting, that he's going to be the starting left tackle. His size and athleticism and everything that Ben wrote about and that we both talked about just screams this guy could be a perfect pull tackle, Bruce strength guy against the run sort of thing. But with that, it's the experience more so than anything. That's what Elijah Jacquet and Sione Solo don't have, but Justin Hilkema doesn't have. Even Drew Azzopardi on the left side doesn't have that, right? Where Drew Azzopardi has experience at right tackle, playing on the left side. Right, but I'm saying he doesn't have that on the left side, playing at left tackle. And that's why we want Drew Azzopardi to stay on the right side. That's why the coaches want him to stay on the right side, so he doesn't have to go relearn things on the left side. It's why we've been talking about finding a plug-and-play type of player, and that's exactly what it is with McCree. Now, is it the biggest fanfare? Is it a Marcus Bryant? Not necessarily, but I don't think always those transfers pan out, where we've seen a number of big-time transfers go to schools and for one reason or another, it doesn't work out. Now that some people can say, well, that's what happened at Maryland. But as you eloquently put, that was more because the ball was in front of him. That would be like saying Denzel Boston hasn't done anything with what's because he had 3 horsemen in front of him at receiver that nobody else was going to break through. This is a perfect pairing with Brennan Carroll for at least 2 years, I would say, because he has 3 years of eligibility left. I would imagine he stays for 2, and then if he needs a third, so be it. But that also allows Elijah Jaquette to have another year in the program and bulk up a little bit more this season, maybe get some playing time, and then really try to come into 2026 or 2025, thinking way too far down the line here, 2025, where he could potentially be in that mix to start, push. And it's worth noting, Drew Azzopardi decides to leave. What's not to say you kick one of those 2 guys to the right side in 25? It's a good problem to have, but having a guy with multiple years of experience and multiple years still remaining, I think it's a home run for Washington in that regard.
Absolutely. And that's the biggest thing about it, where there are multiple years remaining, and it's everything in terms of what you want physically and what you look for on film, where it's not, a big project and because that was one of the things, and we addressed that in our Monday mailbag as well, where people were saying, oh, well, why didn't this transfer portal period turn out the way most were expecting? It's because the bodies weren't there. And I mean this in no slight to Maximus McCree, but that's the kind of body that you were really looking for and you can be happy with, where it's not, okay, yeah, Marcus Bryant went elsewhere. That was a loss. Let's call a spade a spade. That one was a loss. But outside of that, there weren't a whole lot of other ones where you can look at the Chris Adams one. That one just turned out the way that it did, where there might have been some other concerns there. Who knows how that all played out. But when you look at how everything else is going, this is the perfect kind of guy in what this spring portal period turned into, where there weren't a whole lot of, giant names that entered the portal, where the names that, that everybody was looking for, especially at Washington, were the Arizona guys, Jonas Avellana, Raymond Polito, Wendell Moe. Those guys didn't enter. And you could say the same thing about a lot of the other big schools in the country, where those guys that were projected to enter the portal, the only one who did, that I think is just that giant caliber piece, was Caden Proctor. And we knew that was going to happen, and we knew where he was going. Outside of that, there weren't those pieces. So getting Maximus McCree, who does have the size, who does have the athleticism, who does have the proper fit really for what Jedd Fisch and Brendan Carroll are going to run on the offensive side of the ball, this is great. Now, if he comes in and shows, yeah, I can be a really good pass protector and I can pull against the run and I can do everything that, is asked of me, great. That's great. And like we said last week, Lars, all this team needs along the offensive line is to just be serviceable. And if you can find guys who can be serviceable and do the job and gel and just protect Will Rogers for enough time to get the ball out in some of these quick passing schemes that Jedd Fisch wants to run, this offense is going to be effective. And that's really the end of the story there. And with that being said, we finally got an official commitment out of Cam Broussard. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at LinkedIn, because we're hiring for your small business. You want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is a tool to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, because LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. You can hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. That's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So, Lars, we were waiting on it for a couple of days last week. Matt Zenitz over at 247 Sports reported it on Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day that was. And then finally comes on Saturday, which is really nice to see because I think Cam Broussard could end up starting in the secondary come this fall.
I mean, he absolutely should. When you look at next to Cam Broussard, Mikel Esteen's done some nice things. But when you look at the range that Cam Broussard has, playing 3 different positions that we talked about on, I believe, either Friday's show or Monday's show, whichever one it was. One of those shows we talked about it, where there was enough. When you look on his tape, and I mentioned this on my story on Athlon Sports, where Vinny Sunseri broke down exactly what the safeties have to do. And when you watch him on film, when you look at what he did at multiple different positions, playing in the box, playing free safety, and even playing a little bit of nickel, Cam Broussard really can do it all. And so when you look at what they need at that second safety position next to Cam Broussard, if anything, I mean, I know I told you before the show where certainly going to push Mikel, and that's no slight to Mikel, but that's exactly what you want to do. Where if you're the coaching staff and you're Vinny Sunseri, yeah, you got guys that are veterans in the room, quote unquote veterans, in terms of they have upperclassmen in the roster, but Mikel only has 2 starts and 2 interceptions in his career, maybe not even a start, but I know he's got a couple picks, but he doesn't have the ample playing time that Cam Broussard has. So when you look at that second spot next to him, what is somebody to do at 6'3", 200? Not a lot that Cam Broussard can't do.
Yeah, and so one of the biggest things about this is a point that you and I were very big on throughout spring practice, where we were insistent, it looks like one of these 4 young safeties is going to play. I know I listed them off time and time again, and I'm going to do it again because it's important to note that there are 4 really, really talented safeties coming in. Peyton Waters is already here. We've seen Peyton Waters be really, really good throughout spring practice. He was the highest recruited of the 4 safeties that Washington has brought in. There's Paul Menke, another 4-star. Then there's Rashawn Clark, who flipped from Arizona, and Raheem Wright, a 3-star, who also flipped from Arizona. Those latter 3 guys are all coming in this fall. And you and I were debating, all right, which of these guys is going to burn their red shirt? And now it doesn't look like any of them are, which is great. Because now when we look at this, at the safety depth chart, you can push all those guys down, and we're still certainly going to see some of those guys. Peyton Waters especially was good enough throughout spring practice that there's no way we don't see him this fall. But when we look at what the safety roster looks like now, or just the safety position, Tristan Dunn is going to play. Tristan Dunn is getting better each and every day. I really like what I've seen from him. Vincent Holmes is still coming along. He didn't really take a lot of reps throughout the spring when, starting at wide receiver, flipping over to safety, then entering the transfer portal, then withdrawing. So it was a tumultuous spring for him, to say the least. We didn't really see a lot of him. But you combine those guys. You've got Mikel. Oh, please.
Oh, I was gonna say we did see him almost murder somebody in the spring.
That's true.
We did see him once. We did see him one time, and that was in a very big way.
He did make a very big impression with that hit. No, you're absolutely right. But then on top of that, there's also Justin Harrington coming in from Oklahoma, who's somebody that you and I are both very, very high on when he's healthy. And if he's healthy, maybe he plays in the nickel, maybe he plays up top. But all of a sudden, with Mikel in the room and adding Cam Broussard, this goes from a position where, there's a lot of upside here too. This could very quickly turn into one of the best positions on the team, not just this year, but moving forward as well. And I know that feels like a bold statement, but I truly believe that, where we've seen what Vinny Sunseri can do as a coach. We have seen that he's got a very, very high ceiling for what he can do with these guys, not only on the recruiting trail, but just on field as a coach as well, where I feel we've seen a lot of strides made by all of these safeties throughout spring practice. So moving forward, please. I was just going to say, moving forward with Cam Broussard in the room as well. Somebody who could be here for 2 years. I wouldn't be surprised if he's just here for 1, balls out in the Big Ten and goes into the NFL draft, where he's somebody who can play on all 3 downs. We covered this last week as well. He can play on all 3 downs. He can play over the top. He can walk down in the box and play against the run. He's perfect for this scheme where he can do a little bit of everything.
You're exactly right, and the reason what I was going to say, and it perfectly carries off from that point. This is the perfect problem for Vinny Sunseri and Steve Belichick to have that I wrote on Inside the Huskies today, where this is without question probably going to be the most competitive position battle in fall camp. Now, you can say what you will about receivers, quarterbacks, offensive line, and even edge to a degree, but there's so much talent in this secondary that somebody's going to get quote unquote shorted. It's probably going to be 1 or 2 of the freshmen, but that's okay, because to your point, we're not just talking about 24. We're talking about 25, 26, and so on and so forth. But that's why you go and address these guys and get these veterans right now. Because, yeah, as we mentioned plenty of times on the show, Jedd Fisch said, yeah, I'd love to play freshmen. I have no problem playing freshmen. But with playing freshmen does come kind of lesser expectations in terms of, okay, if you have the veterans, maybe you're winning 8-9 games. If you're playing freshmen, maybe you're winning 6-7 games, and that's cool because they're going to build together, but you could honestly do better in your first year. And so that's why I like that Jedd Fisch and Steve Belichick and Vinny Cincinnati have gotten these transfers, because there's no guarantees in that room. We're talking about, you lost 2 starters, in Asa Turner and Dom Hampton. Cam Bikilanen obviously had ample experience, but doesn't have a full season starting at safety, and nobody has starting experience with his coaching staff. So it's pretty much a clean slate in that respect. Cam and Mikkel were the 2 veterans. But beyond those 2 guys, you need more depth there. And so all these guys, and even bringing in Jordan Shaw, who played a little bit of nickel as well, mostly a cornerback. But then you also have Dyson McCutcheon, who we haven't mentioned, who did get some nickel time as well. And he's listed as that's one thing that's interesting when I was doing some of these stories. Some of these guys are listed safety, like Tristan Dunn, and Mikkel and Cam. But then a lot of them are also, like Rashawn Clark is listed as a defensive back / athlete. So he could play nickel, outside, safety. He could play a number of different spots. He might be a guy where I could see them trying him at a few different positions versus giving him 5, 6, 7 games. He might get 1 or 2 games at each position just to see, hey, where do you excel most early on? And we can kind of develop you from there. But it's the perfect problem to have because it allows you to have an ample amount of players that get you more wins than saying, okay, we don't have a ton of veterans. We have 1 or 2. We're going to roll a bunch of young guys out there. And the secondary, the first season is a little rougher than it should be. It's still going to be rough. But when you get these 2 veteran transfers in, it's a lot less rough than it was looking in spring camp.
So I disagree there just with the end of that statement. I think that by the end of the year, the secondary is going to be one of the stronger points in this team. And I think that Cam Broussard adds to that, where now having just these 2 veteran guys in the back end who can do a little bit of everything, you pair that with whoever starts in the nickel, whether it is Jordan Shaw or maybe even Justin Harrington at this point, and having Elijah Jackson or Thaddeus Dixon on one side and Ephesians Prysock on the other. This is a really, really good group. And if the scheme meshes well with just from, what I've seen from it from so long in New England, it creates turnovers at a very, very high clip. And we know that all these guys can be very productive and pull in those turnovers. So by the end of the year, if everything does go well and it's called effectively and it's just schemed up in the right way, this really could be one of the better secondaries in the Big Ten moving forward, because all these guys have, especially, and it all kind of starts at safety, where Ephesians Prysock can lock down 1 half the field. We know that. But if because there's so much of this, and it's one thing that I was talking about with Thaddeus Dixon during spring camp, where he said there was so much cover 0 that was played last year. It's, you wanted to be aggressive and you want to play this press man coverage, but you never had help behind you. And he says, now I know that I do. And some of the cover 3 things, some of the other different just calls that Steve Belichick has installed in the defense that he knows. And he said, all the corners, we know we have help behind us. So we're not afraid to do that. And then that's something where, Cam Broussard is a perfect example of this, where if he's sitting back and playing free safety and somebody gets beat off the line of scrimmage, he knows he can roll over to that side and help really quickly. And it's something where he's got 4 interceptions in his career at Sac State. I wouldn't be surprised if he can get a couple more this season.
Oh, no doubt. And to clarify, I'm glad you mentioned it because I don't think it was necessarily bad in spring. I'm just saying in terms of the depth, and when you look at the gap between you have upperclassmen and like 4 freshmen, it looks rough on paper, but certainly to your point, yeah, I would not be surprised if this secondary as a whole is kind of what carries the team. And that's kind of the way they've been building it, where, it's the havoc in the back end combined with the havoc in the front end with an assortment of pass rushers, that's going to force turnovers, and it's the perfect recipe for Steve Belichick.
Lars, Danny Sprinkle's done some good things to transfer portal too. His roster is now complete. And we'll get there right after a message from our friends over at Yahoo Finance, because this show wouldn't be possible without the help of our friends over at Yahoo Finance, because when it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place, because they are the #1 financial destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. So, Lars, Danny Sprinkle got his final commit over the weekend, and that's North Dakota guard Tyree Iheneacho, who's just going to do I really like this guy. I wanted to say he's going to do a really great job starting, but I don't think he's going to start. I think that he's somebody who is probably going to come off the bench and just be a really, really solid contributor all around. When you look at his numbers, he averaged 14 points per game, 5-something rebounds, 4 assists, where it's just another guy who is really productive in an all-around fashion, where it's somebody who I wouldn't be surprised if, he's 6'4", 6'5", somebody who Danny Sprinkle tries him at one of his wing spots, and he's not necessarily the most experienced shooter. He's 28% from 3 in his career, but this is one of those guys where I wouldn't be surprised if he's a really solid playmaker, somebody who can distribute the ball and just be exactly what this team needs, where it's certainly stacked with guards, but these aren't just, all these 6'1" guys who are, oh yeah, he's a pass first guy. This is somebody who can play really good defense, can distribute the ball really well, and contribute on the glass too, as well as being a high level scorer.
No doubt. And I think that's the one thing that when we look back at why last season didn't work with so many guards in the roster, it's why this one could. And there's so many guys that can do a number of different things, and they all kind of impact the game in different ways. And I think that's what's worth mentioning, where Iheneacho can come in and be a second 2 guard, a second combo guard.
Sure.
And what we saw in this past season, started the last 19 games in North Dakota, the only reason he didn't start to begin the season was because of the Zach Durfee and eligibility situation, where 2-time transfers weren't eligible to play until mid-December. Once he was able to get out from under that, he took off running. And I think that speaks to just the impact that he can make in any program. And so when you look at what he's going to bring to Washington, there's so many guards, but this also helps potentially, Jace Butler and Zoom Diallo, their learning curve. If they struggle for whatever reason in November and December, you still have these veterans with 3 or 4 years of experience who can just come in and it's no slight to the freshmen, but just because you signed a bunch of 4-star, and we both think Zoom and Jace are going to be great, but especially that's why you build the roster 1 and 3 years out, where Zoom and Jace and some of these younger guys, Tyler Harris is a sophomore from Portland, will be multiple year impact players in the program. But for this season, you need a guy like Iheneacho who can come in, be a dependable player, knows how to distribute the ball, could play the 2, potentially the 3. I think could also play the 1 in some respect as well. But a guy that gives you a number of options to have. And as I said before, when you look at what happened last season, it was kind of like, oh, you can kind of do this, you can kind of do that, you have to do that. It's, oh, you guys can all kind of do similar things a little differently. Perfect. This is the perfect combination to have. And then you look at how it's exactly how he's built the front court depth as well. And so to me, Danny Sprinkle knew exactly the types of players that he wanted to target in his system. And I think that's kind of just a symbolism of why you go get a coach like Danny Sprinkle, who has been a head coach at multiple stops, knows how to run a college program, knows how to build a college program, and knows the types of players he needs to get for his system, and not just trying things and seeing if it works out.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that I think of when I look at especially how the backcourt is shaped up is that, and I was thinking about this while you were saying all that, and I breathed a giant sigh of relief in my head, because there's going to be space on the floor now, and this team is going to want to run, which is something I don't I don't remember the last time we've actually seen this team consistently get out of transition, because I remember whenever Mike Hopkins' team would do it, especially over the last couple of years with Keon Brooks, it would be really effective, but it just never felt like the pace was pushed at a consistent rate, where that's something that this team is built to do now, where I feel one of the reasons that you go get a guy like this, and, you know, a guy like DJ Davis or Luis Courtwright, especially, I feel like he's going to be a big player in that as well, is I look at some of these guys that you look at their previous stops and it's, oh, he was the assist leader here. He was an assist leader there, but he's also, 6'4", 6'5", and can move. It's, oh yeah, this is a guy who can get out in transition and space the floor and find a DJ Davis who can shoot, or find a Tyler Harris who's improving the 3-point shot every single day. And you can find one of those guys and all of a sudden, oh yeah, this team becomes incredibly hard to guard. And you see why Danny Sprinkle's offense worked so well at Montana State. You see why it worked so well at Utah State, and why it can work so well here at Washington. And then when you get into the half court, as you said, you look at the front court depth, and that's why you needed to go get a great Osabor, where the roster was going to work pretty well. But that's why we've talked about great Osabor the way that we have, because it puts this roster over the top. And if Frank Kepnang is healthy alongside him, we know he's not necessarily ever been like a super consistent offensive threat in the Hopkins system, but we know that he can be that with the ball in his hands from just the way that he plays with his back to the rim sometimes. So I'm really excited about what this could all look like going forward.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that we're basically talking about in the roundabout way. It's versatility with the lineup, where you can play Frank at the 5, Great at the 4, and then dealer's choice.
I'd put Harris or Conway at 3.
Right, but that's my point, is whether you could also have Great at the 5 and Conway at the 4 and go a guard-heavy lineup. There's so much versatility to this, where Danny Sprinkle now not only can match up with teams, but he can control the pace of play in every game that he faces, where as long as the roster stays healthy, that's obviously the key here. Because if you lose a couple of these depth guys, then you can start to see how the depth impacts the system. But from the beginning, that's what you're trying to do, where you go get a Casey Ebekwe from Oregon State to help back up Frank Kepnang. You have Wilhelm Breidenbach working with Chris Conway. And then you think about the other guards we haven't mentioned, DJ Davis and Mickey Mason. Like, the two first guards that we haven't even mentioned are probably going to play the most minutes for this team. So that's why, it's this good problem to have, where if you had just gotten a DJ Davis in this and then signed 3 or 4 more freshmen, so you're saying, oh, I'm building for this, and we're gonna play 8 or 9 guys this year and work towards the rest. No, Danny Sprinkle's coming in to win right away, but he knows he won't really hit his peak until 2 or 3 years down the line, which is a scary thought considering how he's built this roster up.
Absolutely. And that's one of the biggest things, is you talked about the depth and you talked about like an injury here, an injury there. And I was kind of looking at it, and outside of, maybe at center, and I don't want to talk about Frank Kepnang that way, because whenever he's on the court, he's so impactful, but he's suffered injuries each of the last 2 seasons. Outside of center, I don't, I look around this roster and I don't see like, one injury at this position is really going to hurt. One injury there is really going to hurt, where, like if we saw, for example, Severe Wheeler go down for extended period of time last year, where I think Paul McCahey would have done a good job running the point, but it wasn't in the same way that Severe had done so, where all of a sudden that just takes so much out of what they were going to do. And I don't see that on this roster. I see so much depth. I wrote about it over on Huskies Wire the other day, where I said, this is the most front court depth we've seen at Washington in a very, very long time, which is so nice to see. And it's so promising when you just kind of think about what we've seen for so long at Washington. And we've got to wait till, November to see what this is really going to look like on the court. But it's all so promising. And as you said, Sprinkle has done a really, really good job of putting it all together and building for right now, because he didn't really have a choice. When we look at this roster, he needed to make sure that he could compete this year, with a lot of, just the way the roster just kind of fell apart, which is not his fault at all. But the way he's put it back together and the way he's built it up to go into year 1 in the Big Ten is really exciting.
No doubt. Well, I think also, to be fair, he could have built it differently. He could have gone younger. He could have said, and so I agree with your point, but there's so many kind of what ifs, and I think that's the nice thing about what I was saying with Sprinkle, is you can just tell he's been around the block a couple of times. You can tell he understands the assignment. He knows the resources that are available at Washington, which have been available. This isn't like Danny Sprinkle just discovered an untapped, line of resources on Montlake. This has been there on Washington. They just haven't had the right coach in place. And so getting, think about it, at least I didn't think necessarily Frank Ekman would have come back. And the fact that Sprinkle gets to keep him around and yeah, you lose Corin Johnson, but the one significant loss right there, look at the guys he brought in. Sprinkle has done everything correctly that he could. Again, obviously you wish Corin the best because as a local kid, I hope he does well at Louisville. But every other transfer that he brought in, you could see why, and you don't really have those question marks where certain players that Mike Hopkins brought in, he's like, he doesn't always engage. Like when you talk about the front court depth, like Braxton Neal was a player where he would engage for 5 minutes and then disengage for 5 or 10 minutes. Beckway, not the case. And it's all these traits that Sprinkle brings to the program that you can see personified on every single player that's on the roster.
Absolutely. Lars, with that being said, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your constant support. We've got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason. So make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you like the video. Click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you got any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, make sure you drop them right down here in the comments. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it all really does help us out. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Wednesday.